and welcome to Frankly Franklin. My name is Mary Lou Matthews, and today I have a guest that I think a lot of people in Franklin will find very interesting. My guest is Tom Moody. Many of you know Tom. He taught English for 30 years here at Franklin Simpson High School. But Tom is on our show today because he's kind of an expert in local history. Tom, thanks for coming today.
Glad to be with you.
Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in local history.
Well, I think I had the good fortune of growing up in a home and my grandmother and great aunt's home where history was just taught. It was just part of life. And one of the great aunts was particularly good at storytelling. And often there was a tidbit of humor that was thrown in. She found humor in lots of things. And I just grew up hearing about the older generation and history of Franklin. I found it fascinating.
And I guess your aunts made some of these personalities really come alive for you.
Yes, yes. Particularly with the bits of humor. Memorable that way.
And I think you told me that one of your aunts was in fact a friend of Mrs.Goodnight's. And I thought we might talk for a few minutes about Mrs. Goodnight because I think there are a lot of newcomers in the community that maybe don't know the rich history there and know exactly who Mrs. Goodnight was.
Right.
Why don't you give us a little background on Mrs. Goodnight?
Well, both great aunts and my grandmother were very good friends. They visited in one another's home. They were associated at church. And
now this was the Presbyterian Church.
Presbyterian Church. And actually, my great-grandfather and Judge Goodnight practiced law in Franklin together. So there were many connections. Mrs. Goodnight was about 10 years older than my family members. And so I just grew up hearing these wonderful stories about how caring Mrs. Goodnight was of the community and the idea of giving her life's savings, you might say, and as a bequest to the citizens of Franklin, I guess always impressed me very greatly.
Now, was she from Franklin originally, or did she marry into Franklin?
Well, actually, Judge Goodnight, I think his roots were maybe in Allen County.
So he was the foreigner.
Yes.
That's one of the first things I learned when I moved to Simpson
That's
County,
right.
that you could live here forever and you're never really a Simpson Countian.
Well, she was Ella Hoy, H-O-Y, and many people associate Hoy's Cave with something interesting in Franklin, but she was part of the Hoy family.
Now, where exactly is Hoy's Cave?
Well, north of Franklin and near the Patton Road.
Oh, okay.
And there was a large two-story frame house across from the cave there on 31W that has since been torn down, but that was a Hoy home.
Now, did she grow up there?
I'm not certain that was the home where she grew up. I really just don't know that.
But she married Judge Goodnight, who I guess
Goodnight
was a lawyer,
Yes.
a young lawyer in town
Yes.
when she married him?
He studied law at Cumberland University in Lebanon, Tennessee, and practiced law here, was judge and United States representative from this area, and just very highly respected citizens of this community.
And lived down there at what we now call the Goodnight House.
Goodnight House, yes. That house was built by the McDonald brothers were the architects, and they were a Louisville firm. I think Judge Goodnight must have known them because they engaged in building public buildings primarily, but a number of finer homes in Louisville, too. So they engaged him to be the architect. I think it was about 1906 that house was built.
And I guess in 1906 there would have been lots of land around the house?
Well, some. There was a barn, I think, and maybe a stable, several buildings there, but it included the lot on which the library sits.
And that was still the main street?
Oh, yes.
Or that was at that time the main street, so they built their home?
Very much so. Facing the main thoroughfare.
I guess that was the place to build then.
The place to be.
Well, I know that Mrs. Goodnight's story is kind of a tragic story, that both her husband and her son preceded her in death.
Yes.
What about her husband?
Well, as I said, he was a respected judge, jurist, representative to the United States House of Representatives, and was highly regarded, I think, in the area, in the state of Kentucky, in legal circles. And his name was Isaac Herschel Goodnight, and the son's name was Isaac Hoy Goodnight. So Hoy was a promising young lawyer. He too had been to Cumberland University in Lebanon and attended a carnival south of town, and a stray bullet, I think it was target practice or something, a stray bullet hit him and killed him.
While he was at the carnival?
While he was at the carnival.
Now, how old was he when this happened?
Well, I'm not certain the exact age. He was young, but...
well, now, was he as old? Somewhere I read, I thought that he was maybe in his early 30s. Is that too old?
I believe that is correct. I like to be accurate, but
know.
sometimes we don't have all the facts in front of us.
But now her husband had already died at this time.
I believe that is the case.
Okay.
But Hoy was an only child and a beloved son. And there is a plaque which she established at the Presbyterian Church which reads in part, a loving son to his mother who had the misfortune to survive him.
That's such a tragic sounding
And
plaque.
I suppose I grew up in my childhood reading that plaque, and that sort of made an impression too. It seems very sad. She sort of withdrew from social life. As you know, late Victorian ladies would visit one another in the afternoon and have some sort of refreshment. She somewhat retired from social life, and
of course it was the tradition then to go into mourning.
That's right. And then she began reading. She always had an interest in art. She had been to Franklin Female College, valedictorian of her class in 1874, I believe. And as she began reading about art, and she already was trained in literature, she began thinking of going to Europe. And so she saved, maybe too much on meals and her own care and entertainment, and she decided to go to Europe. So she made a number of trips to Europe, and each time when she came back, she would go to the classes and talk to the children about what she had seen, and I think helped develop an appreciation for the arts, really. She had what we would call a very primitive projection device, and she used her postcards that she bought while in Europe and projected those on a screen and would talk about these things. So you might say it was Mrs. Goodnight's travelogues.
Yeah,
but she would share those with not only school children but other groups, and it was an exciting thing for people to hear about those.
Now, I know people traveled to Europe a lot then. Well, not a lot, but I know people traveled and would take the grand tour sometimes when they graduated from college. I wonder how many people at that time in Franklin traveled to Europe. Not that I expect you to know a number, but I wonder if this was kind of an anomaly at the time.
Well, it was certainly, I think, a little unique. There was certain awe and mystery and wonder about being able to travel. I don't think she was considered to be an extremely wealthy woman, but she had means, and I have often heard that she saved as much as she could so that she could go on these trips. But it was a way of diverting her sadness, you might say, from her son's death and, of course, her husband's somewhat recent death. So.
And so, do you know how old she was when she died, or when she finally died?
She died in 1935. I don't know her exact age. She had graduated from Franklin Female College in 1874, so that gives some time perspective.
Some indication. And what did she do with her estate, with what was left?
Well, you know, she was always interested in education, and I think people of her time were very much concerned about the progress of mankind, humankind, and they felt that education was the salvation for humankind. So both she and her husband were concerned about education. One of the interesting things that they brought to Franklin was the Southern School of Osteopathy. Its headquarters was in Missouri, and Franklin endorsed it and built a rather handsome building. It was the elementary school when I went to school.
I think your picture there is interesting. I told Tom I didn't know if I wanted to talk about the School of Osteopathy because I wasn't sure I could say it. But I think...
this is an advertisement for the next term beginning Monday, February 6, 1906.
And for those like me who didn't know what osteopathy was...
Well, I remember there were several persons in town when I was a child who hung out their shingle, and they were osteopaths, you know. One was Dr. Matt Beard. It was basically a therapy, I guess you would say, a kind of massage therapy of the joints and the bones. And of course, the root word osteo has to do with the bones. And it was a thriving art. It was not the same thing as chiropractic, but it was, I almost want to say it was a milder form of treatment than the chiropractic treatment.
And so she supported that or helped establish it?
She and Judge Goodnight both were very impressed by that therapy and encouraged the location of the school in this area. And there were many persons who came to Franklin, lived here, and studied osteopathy. A kind of amusing thing from my fourth grade memory, Miss Winnie Ross Cherry was my teacher, and there was a door outside the classroom that led to the third floor, and it was always said that there was a skeleton upstairs. And if it existed, it was left over from the study of the bones of the body.
So that was a forbidden room, I guess.
That's right. It was a hanging skeleton, no doubt.
Now, I'm just curious, when was that building torn down? Do you have any idea?
Well, it was torn down to build the present Franklin Elementary School, but the exact date I don't remember.
That's okay. Well.
But you ask about their interest in education, I think. Just as I said, Mrs. Goodnight shared her travels with people. She wanted people to know and to appreciate beauty and culture and history, literature. And she had a dream, I think, sparked by maybe her son's death, the loss of a son, and she was thinking about young people and learning and progress. And so she had a dream of a library. There had been various attempts at libraries in Franklin, but it was like bringing books to one room or some small room above a store.
I would imagine it would be very expensive.
Right. And so she also, of course, had been one of the founding members and chief architects, I guess you would say, of the music club. And she thought of meeting rooms for civic organization. So I think her original idea had been she would love to leave money for a library and a meeting room. And as I said, she died in 1935, so by that time the various Roosevelt social programs were beginning and in progress. And just before her death, my great aunt said that it was she, in fact, who had talked with her about the possibility of Works Progress Administration coming in, but I think others had too. And so Mrs. Goodnight's death was very unexpected. She was in Detroit, and but she had already started some architectural work, as I understand it, and when at the end, her about $36,000 $37,000 given to the city for this purpose turned out to build a building for about $81,000 that included an auditorium. And I was always told that the auditorium was later, that was post-life. She did not even think of an auditorium. But because of the joining of WPA and her bequest, the city was able to build a building that was much larger in scope.
Can you imagine building all that today for just $80,000?
No.
That's and then they dedicated the library.
Yes.
I think you've got some fairly interesting old newspapers there.
Yes, a 1937 Franklin Favorite
Let's turn it around a little bit.
reports this event. It happened that Alvin Barkley, who was a representative from Kentucky and eventually vice president, came to dedicate the building. There's a picture here of the auditorium and some of the library board members, I think. Of course, that was one of the stipulations of the will, that the city appoint a board to govern the operation of the building.
And so that's still our board today that governs.
That's right.
And I noticed
the music club gives curtains.
And I really like the title here. It says, "Architect does a splendid job." And here's a picture of the youthful architect who designed the building.
Mr. Ingram.
Yeah.
There's an article here about, that I would like to point, well, here's a picture of Alvin Barkley in 1937.
And he came for the dedication.
For the dedication, yes.
So that must have been quite an event for little bitty Franklin.
It certainly was. He came back when the swimming pool was dedicated.
Oh.
A little boy at that time.
Yeah, the caption is real interesting. It says, "An orator, scholar, and statesman, the intellectual life of Kentucky and the nation has been furthered by the brilliant work of Senator Barkley." The newspaper didn't try to be unbiased then at all.
That's right. Well, I think he was a very honored Kentuckian.
And we have the program of the dedication. Why don't you point out a few things there?
My Old Kentucky Home was sung. And the director of the Works Progress Administration, Mr. Pleasant Brooks, was there. Speaking for the memorial trustees was George Duncan, one of the druggists at R.H. Moore Drug Company, Mayor Clark Gillespie, Honorable L.B. Finn, and Alvin Barkley, and the president of Cumberland University, the Reverend J.T. Barrow, who was minister of the Presbyterian Church, spoke at the invocation. There's also a family friend of both my family and Ms. Goodnight's, Dr. Charles W. Welch, who was minister of Fourth Avenue Presbyterian Church in Louisville. And he wrote something that I think captures a sense of the respect that Mrs. Goodnight had. He could not attend the dedication, but he said, "Nothing has ever happened in Franklin at which I had rather be present than on the occasion of the dedication of the most practical and beautiful building of that kind I've ever known. After Hoy's death, I feel that I was perhaps closer to Mrs. Goodnight than anyone else. She talked to me often of her hopes for the Memorial Library and discussed with me very fully her family and church relationships." So we are very fortunate. Many people use the library today. It's had expansions over the years. The shelves are stacked with books now, and we have
Miss Goodnight would be real happy, don't you?
I think she would be very happy, yes. And there was a kind of remarkable thing along the way that many citizens don't realize. She left this bequest to the city of Franklin, and a stipulation in her will was that should the county care to join in the future, that it might do so. And so several years ago, we made arrangements for it to be a joint city-county tax base. And that, in my way of thinking, was a very great thing, because certainly Mrs. Goodnight, in her philosophy, would not have wanted to exclude county persons from using the library.
Well, I think it's amazing how much we use the library and the meeting room and the auditorium, and it really has become kind of a cultural
Indeed it has.
Cultural center for Franklin. Now, what role did she play in the music club?
Well, she was a graduate of the art and music department, literary department of Franklin Female College. She did play piano and organ, and she did sing some, but she was very much interested in the development of the vocal and vocal arts as well as the keyboard arts. And there had been some sense of ladies' organization in Franklin prior to 1905, but the music club named the organization for Mrs. Goodnight because she was such a driving force for the development of these arts. And really, I think Franklin has always been considered a leader in the arts, and I certainly associate it with the Franklin Female College because all the girls had opportunities for training in art and in music. So piano, voice, instruction was very prominent there, and so the music club gave an opportunity for those ladies to perform, and eventually theater arts came into focus. Mrs. B.W. Neely, who was also a good friend of Mrs. Goodnight's, led at least once a year some kind of review of a musical or an opera, and local citizens formed the chorus, male and female, and some had the solo leads and so forth. So it was a great source of entertainment and opportunity. Of course, oftentimes people saw this as a great social thing. Mm-hmm. The ladies dressed up and went to the Wednesday afternoon programs once a month.
Well, you and I were talking before the program about the Victorian age mm-hmm. and the gentility of the age, mm-hmm. and of course women didn't have a whole lot they could do outside the home, so I think there were the literary clubs and the music clubs.
And in those days women weren't holding jobs
exactly.
along with their husbands, so they had a little bit of free time, and there was also a current topics club, and there are programs in existence of their topics, and they were lofty topics. They were world issues and archaeology and some of the great topics of the world and history and so forth.
Well, I sometimes think about these, bright, intelligent women who were in some ways trapped by mm-hmm. society's expectations, mm-hmm. and this was the only way they had
exactly.
to think about things mm-hmm. and talk about these sorts of issues.
And so having a library mm-hmm. was very important because some research went on and mm-hmm. the books were to be read.
Wouldn't you love to hear some of their discussions?
Certainly
it's
would.
A shame they didn't have tape recordings then, so we could hear their discussion. Mm-hmm. Well, you've mentioned Franklin Female College mm-hmm. A number of times, and I've always found the story of Franklin Female College very interesting. Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where it was located?
Mm-hmm. Well, you've done research on the topic
too. Oh, but you're the
so
expert.
Well, I find it interesting, and when I was teaching in middle school a number of years ago, I would ask students to trace their route to the school, to middle school or to high school, and to draw a map. And many of them did not know the streets on which they traveled, which seemed a little bit curious to me. But when it came to College Street, I was always amused that the students had no idea why the street was named College. And it, of course, is a prominent street in downtown Franklin. And it was at the south, what was then the south end, the southern extension of College Street. And of course, we've now extended it in what used to be Irish Drive and out into what we used to call Austin Subdivision. But it led to the hill, and the college building was constructed at that high point.
So approximately where the middle school?
Where the middle school entryway was the entry to the college mm-hmm. building. Mm-hmm. It burned. It was done by community subscription, and at the end of the Civil War, it was a big effort on the part of community leaders to establish the school and to gather the funds to build a rather handsome building. and there was a fire, I believe in the 1870s. Please don't check me on these dates, but it's approximately that time, and the building had to be reconstructed at that time, but it lasted into the 1920s, and it attracted girls from all over this area, from other communities, and there was a boarding school as well as a day population, you might say. But very lofty topics. A great deal of Latin was read, the classical subjects. As we've already said, art was taught, music, and literature.
And I think you and I were laughing before we came in here about, I don't remember what they called it, but it was their physical fitness. It required that they had to walk.
Physical culture. This is the 1896-97 catalog for Franklin Female College. Physical culture. Besides devoting a part of each day to walking, a systematic course in physical culture is provided. This admirable plan of healthful exercise brings into play every muscle without undue strain upon any.
So I guess this is the weightlifting of...
The weightlifting is.
There were some other things on there I think that we found kind of interesting or amusing.
Well, there's moral and religious training. It was very definitely centered on morality, and of course this is an outgrowth of the Victorian age, the Victorian morality, plus the girls, ladies, were expected to go to Sunday school and church in our local churches. And some Bible was taught. I know one of my great aunts studied Greek and Hebrew there. Of course,
I can't imagine.
Not an extensive course, but it was introduction, you might say, to Greek and Hebrew.
Well, I think we noticed that one of the supplies the girls had to bring for themselves was their own Bible.
Yes.
Along with their own fork and knife.
That is
We thought that was an interesting...
Outfit is the title.
Yes.
Boarding pupils furnish their own sheets, blankets, pillowcases, towels, napkins, and all toilet articles. Everyone must have overshoes, umbrella, gossamer, dictionary, Bible, and knife, fork, and spoon. So it was a different day, wasn't it?
It was a different day. And I think we talked about that maybe World War I and the effects of the war were probably what brought an end.
Yes.
Because as I remember in doing my research, after about 1916, 1917, enrollment begins to fall off.
That's right. Well, of course, then public schools were coming into greater prominence too. And I suppose early Depression situations might have had some effect there. But it became greater difficulty for the community to support it.
And I can't remember, we were looking at an invoice, and it was, what, $25 a quarter for
something like that,
a boarding pupil?
A boarding pupil. All of my great aunts and uncles went to Franklin Female College.
Oh, did they? Now, do you remember them telling any stories about events at Franklin Female College?
Well, I think there was a little bit of mischief that went on, even amid all these rules. Maybe at chapel time, a little too much giggling or something like that. Sometimes the girls were reprimanded.
And what about gentlemen visitors? It seems like I remember reading something in one of the catalogs about...
Well, that had to be a very chaperone.
Yes, it was.
There had to be chaperones, and Gilbertine Moore has a picture of a group of ladies in a car, and you know, you couldn't just get in the car and drive around. You had to have definite chaperonage.
It was just another day and time, wasn't it?
Very, very different time.
Yeah. Well, Tom, this has really been interesting. I think you're kind of a fountain of information, and I know there's lots of other
well,
goodies.
these scrapbooks help jog the memory. You know.
I know that you've accumulated stuff over the years from your family and have all these wonderful scrapbooks, and you'll have to come back sometime.
Well, that's the value of saving, you see. They saved everything.
Yeah, we might put in a plug for that. As historians, in a sense, it's so important to save
That is true.
all these things that sometimes look like junk, but they're such wonderful
Letters,
historical
receipts,
sources.
all kinds of things, pictures.
Well, thank you for being with us today,
Well,
and
it's been fun.
I hope you'll come back again and talk to us about some other aspects of Franklin
We'll
history.
develop a new topic.
Okay.